Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. Good morning and thank you very much for joining us. Here's what you can look forward to on today's show. We'll be taking a look at the rise of citizen journalism and how social media continues to play a role in exposing issues that are ignored by mainstream media. We'll also be unpacking a beauty campaign that aims to go against the way women are depicted in the media in an effort to change societal beauty standards. And we also take a look at what's inside the Sunday newspapers and, well, you'll have to stay tuned for that as we will be going through those papers a little bit later on. But before we engage with our panel, with all of that, let's take a look at your Sunday newspaper headlines. This is what's on the front pages. The Sunday Times is leading with a story about how the Hawks have named their number one target as they close in on gangs believed to be behind at least 23 cash-in-transit heists. Wellington Bibi Kwenenda, who's 38, is believed to be the mastermind behind a spate of these heists in Gauteng and surrounding provinces. And in the past 10 days, officers have arrested 6 of his alleged key lieutenants. The City Press is running with a story about President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's fresh from raising 265 billion rand in investments. He's challenged his critics who claim that he is weak, insisting that instead that he is an effective leader and is driven by his desire to unite the ANC. The Sunday Independent is also running with President Cyril Ramaphosa on their front page, with the president saying that his government will win the fight against the perpetrators of state capture, and he's hitting back as well at people questioning his strength as a leader. In KwaZulu-Natal, the Sunday Tribune is leading with a story about a damning forensic report allegedly showing how eThekwini municipal officials manipulated the recruitment process to employ a woman who had helped Mayor Zandile Gumede with her electoral bid. The Sunday Tribune has seen the report compiled by the City Integrity and Investigations Unit, and it shows details of how officials allegedly promoted by Gumede went out of their way to hire Thabisile Nkayine, who became a project and a ceremonial affairs executive, earning just over R500,000 a year. She was offered the job on Christmas Day in 2016. Cape Town's Weekend Argus is running with a story about a serial killer. The police believes that he made the farming town of Wellington his own private graveyard. He's been preying on desperate women seeking jobs as far back as 2012. Police say that they've nabbed the killer, but are uncertain how many women may have fallen victims to his reign of terror. Johan Williams, who's 47, briefly appeared in Wellington Magistrates Court on Friday. Crossing our borders into Swaziland, the Sunday Observer there is leading with a story about Minister Ndlela Simelani's inability to tolerate journalists. It's reported that after noting a Sunday Observer journalist taking pictures of some of the vehicles which were parked at the offices of the Deputy Prime Minister on Friday morning, Ndlela Simelani called for the arrest of the journalist. And in West Africa, Nigeria's Daily Trust is leading with a story about how 2 frontline contenders in yesterday's Ekiti governorship election, Dr. Kayode Fayemi and of the All Progressive Congress, and Professor Kolapo Olosola of the People's Democratic Party, have predicted victory to their side even as votes were still being counted. All right, so that's the front pages of our papers here and abroad. Well, what we're going to do is take a look at those stories and others again a little bit later on. But we are going to start with social media and all sorts of things. I mean, and citizen journalism. The emergence of social media has significantly significantly changed the dynamics of journalism and traditional media. The platforms give power to every user to communicate and inform, and dare I say disinform as well. And this is the case with the story of Jannah Jihad, who is the youngest journalist in the world. She started sharing stories about living under Israeli occupation when she was just 7 years old, after witnessing the killings of family members. She sat down with the SABC this past week, and let's take a look and see how that conversation went.
I became a journalist when I was 7 years old, when I saw that there is not enough journalists to cover things that happens in Palestine or in Nabi Saleh in general in my village. Like when my friend Mustafa had been killed, my uncle Rishti had been killed, a lot of things started to happen, and the world didn't know about our feelings as children living under occupation. So I wanted to cover the things that happens with us as Palestinians living under occupation, to try to send that message that really has to be sent, to let the world know that we just want to live in peace, want to live in justice, want to live in equality. Because it's enough of war, it's enough of killing, it's enough of seeing people that we love, seeing their blood on the street.
An incredible young woman there. But, you know, again, citizen journalism is not just for the few. I think everybody who posts something now is almost a citizen journalist in some cases. Right, to help us unpack this story and the other stories that we'll be looking at on the program for the rest of this hour, I'm joined by Queenin Maswabi, who's been with us before. Queenin, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming back.
Good morning, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. It's an interesting story, this one. This young lady, Jannah, talks about her need to tell the story that wasn't being told, that there weren't enough journalists. And we're seeing more and more of this, where citizens are just telling the stories of things that are happening around them. There's good and bad sides of this. Your take on the rise of citizen journalism?
So with the rise of social media use by people, obviously citizen journalism has been at the center of disseminating this information to news agencies and people who have the authority to do these stories. It is a good thing because firstly, it gives people a chance to see another perspective of a story, because now this is a first-hand account. It might be a bit different to how a news agency would look at the issue. But then when you're looking at the bad sides of citizen journalism, which could be fake news, we have to look at that. You can't take anything from social media and simply just pull it off and say that it's a legit story. Fact-checking has to be one of the key factors when it comes to taking information from social media, videos, or any kind of footage from people who aren't journalists and who do not have the expertise to know whether it's fake or not. But with Jannah's example, it is a very good platform, and it's becoming bigger and bigger in South Africa. There have been a lot of videos posted on social media of incidents which maybe could be racist incidents, or could be incidents of children being mistreated, or any of those kind of examples, and they've really helped journalists uncover the big story behind it.
Does it worry you as a journalist of a mainstream outlet that a lot of people are getting their news from Facebook and Twitter and places like that, as opposed to from coming to media sources such as yours that are regulated and have to answer to people if you get things wrong?
Yeah, sometimes it does seem like a kind of threat, because everybody can be a journalist. Anyone can go out there and film something, and it could go viral. So at the same time, there are certain expertise that journalists have, certain tools that we know of that we can use to make sure that whatever information we've been given is legit. So I think that's the only thing that separates journalists right now from ordinary citizens.
The rise of citizen journalism, is it an indicator that maybe people don't quite trust mainstream media anymore, or that they're not sure about what you're saying? It's almost as if I will trust an ordinary man in the street before I will trust a newspaper that has got all sorts of constraints and issues to deal with.
It could be a little bit of that, but at the same time, remember that social media has made journalism shift quite a bit. So a couple of years back, you'd have to wait for a press statement to know about a certain issue. But now an organization can simply go on Twitter and tweet it. You know, so there's a lot of shifting in the media space already. And I think that's why citizen journalism right now is thriving. In most countries because of social media. But I don't think necessarily it's because our conventional news outlets aren't reliable enough, or people want to rely on ordinary citizens to tell them stories. Yes, to a certain extent though.
Can we call citizen journalism journalism?
I think it's really tricky. Not fully, but it could be a good source. I think it's the first step of journalism, getting information, getting evidence, getting footage. But packaging it in the right manner, not so, I'm not that convinced about it. So it depends on how it's packaged, and that's why I don't think it could be a threat to us journalists.
All right. Well, it is a threat in the sense that people are reading our newspapers less and less, and they are first going to social media and all these other sources to get these stories. Has it influenced the way that mainstream media operate? Because you often see mainstream media following a story that's trending, so that it started there and then we picked up on it.
It's really tricky because I started journalism at a time where I could go on Twitter and check trends and then figure out what people are talking about, what they're interested in, and then try to structure my stories around that. But we can't always rely on that, right? Because remember, social media only makes up a small population of our country. It's only a particular amount of people who are on Twitter, who are vocal on Twitter, and who can make these topics trend. Let's not forget about going back to the ground and doing journalism as we know it, as it started out, you know. So I think it's shaped it in the manner that now we no longer look at our newspapers anymore. You don't read your newspapers on a Sunday only. What I do usually, I just go online and see what City Press or whatever newspaper has written. So I think social media has made it easier to get the information now. Unfortunately, it's making most newspapers suffer because we no longer have to buy newspapers. So I think it's a way to disseminate the information quicker, but at the same time, there are some platforms that are struggling because of it.
All right, so you're Huffington Post. You're not physically, I can't go into a shop and buy a Huffington Post newspaper. You're completely digital.
Yes.
So you're almost playing in the same game as the social media, and you've got Twitter accounts and so on and so forth. So how do you straddle having a web page and being kind of a proper full-on publication, and also having to tell your stories in 140 characters on social media?
Okay, so social media works well for breaking news, as you know. It works well for when a reporter's out trying to give live feeds to people on Twitter about what's happening at a particular event. But as far as online goes, right now what people are doing, instead of writing a whole article, things have changed. I can take my tweets from a press briefing, write an introduction, then cobble some tweets. And that's what it's changing so much. That's what's changing in journalism. And I think it's a very powerful and a good tool to use, you know. You see a lot of stories being broken first on Twitter by journalists, then going to their online platform, then writing a full story. So I think it's also a good way to punt out stories, draw people into your publication. So if they know, okay, Queenan's working on this particular article and she just broke this news, obviously they'll then come to Huffington Post to read more details about the story. So I think that's how you can incorporate the two, and that's how you can use them effectively.
And I suppose there's a danger sometimes where we think we have an eyewitness account, and it turns out this picture was taken 5 years ago in another country. How do we check? How do we give ourselves some assurance that what we're seeing is what we're seeing?
I think the onus is on the journalists. I know with most breaking news sites and most media companies, it's hard to sit back with information and say, let's first fact check, because we always want to be first. And I think that's the danger that we're walking into because of social media. So there are a couple of tools that can be used to ensure that people know that this is not a fake picture. Because remember with the protests we had with the farm killings, there were a lot of pictures from a while back, 10 years ago. And they were put out on social media and people thought they were current pictures, and that was very problematic. So I think now it's up to journalists to find tools that can assist them to figure out whether this is a current picture or if it was taken a while ago, or if it's safe to post certain things, and to rather hold back than to be first, I think.
Right. So last question. Journalism, citizen journalism, blogging, tweeting, are we having to redefine what the word journalism means actually? Because the consumers are not making the distinctions that you and I would make as journalists.
Yeah, it's quite tricky. And a couple of years back, I remember in 2009, with citizen journalism seen as a growing part of journalism, there were some companies who started their own kind of programs where they incorporated normal citizens into their publications, saying, okay, you will be our citizen journalists and you will give us first-hand encounters and all that. And with them having done maybe a 6-week course and having figured out what the basics of journalism is, it seemed like they were going to the right direction. However, I think as a young journalist, I know that it takes a lot of experience. You know, you need to learn how to trust your instincts, know when people are lying to you, know how to fact check and to double check, and who to call when people are making certain claims to verify. So I think it is kind of confusing for most people, but I think the fact checking part is the most important one. Yeah.
All right, Kini, we're going to leave that for the time being, and when we come back after the break, we carry one of those themes, these images that we see, how true are they? And one company is trying to fight back as best they can, find out how and who that is.
We are losing the best of kids. People that are fathers or pastors that comes from a church.
No taxi, nothing. We were not notified. I get to town, there's nothing.
News at 9. We go beyond the headlines of the day and breaking news to bring you all the angles and in-depth analysis of stories that impact your life. We are on the ball with all economic stories. Our bureaus around the globe are ready to connect you to events as and when they happen. So join us every day at 9 to zoom in on the day's big stories.
We give you a front row seat to all the local and international entertainment news on Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
This brings into question just the current situation, that we are in crisis, that we are not protecting our children even after a criminal case is opened.
It's very difficult to negotiate to communicate to you as to where exactly are we, because we have presented a comprehensive package.
We have compromised a lot, and if ESCOM is not going to be in their senses, they will really be putting us into a serious problem.
The story of refugees is one of resilience, perseverance, and courage. Ours must be of solidarity, compassion, and action.
If they will be coming here and say they want everything free from Home Affairs, we can't do that.
To do application for passport is a very, very big problem. They don't allow the person to have a passport as a refugee.
Welcome back, you're watching Media Monitor. Now, is beauty only skin deep? The beauty debate is one of the most enduring, controversial topics that needs a wider platform. Now, for years, women and girls had been searching for the essence of beauty and perfection, so much so that they are dedicating most of their time and money on different products and treatments to enhance their appearances. And let me say, a lot of men are doing that now as well. And because of this, our perception of beauty has been distorted over time. Well, this month, the company Dove has launched a campaign for real beauty marketing with no digital distortion mark. Now, this mark will roll out across all new branded content globally. And by January the 2nd, 2019, the mark will be incorporated into all Dove static imagery, showcasing women across print, digital, and social that will represent a non-distorted image of women. Dove says that they will be held accountable to only show accurate and genuine portrayals of people as they appear in real life. Okay, Queen Ian, this is an interesting thing, and as a young woman you would see and understand some of the pressures that young women in particular go through in terms of they pick up a magazine, they see this cover, and they're constantly being told what beauty is, and they're trying to live up to those standards. But what we're finding is that these images are not really what they seem.
Yeah, Peter, so there's been an incident where a very big media personality, Lerato Kganyago, was doing a cover, and the pictures of her unedited were released. And people were very surprised by what they saw, because it's not what they expected. Because with celebrities and all these media personalities, we're expecting a certain kind of person looking a certain kind of way. And there was so much shock, people talking about how much cellulite she has, and it really broke her spirit. She went on social media crying about it. She was devastated because of this. And I could totally understand where she was coming from, but at the same time it made me wonder how much Photoshop goes into these covers, how much covering up of marks, of all their flaws goes into that. And I think that's the scary part, being portrayed in a certain way and knowing that you quite far from that kind of definition. I think it's a very dangerous thing, and it's false advertising.
So here's the dilemma, and this is where marketers are going to have to try and figure out what they do. Do we show what's real or what people want to see? Because people partly want fantasy. We're partly kind of obsessed with movie stars because we think that they are perfect, even though we may know they may not really. So what does a marketer do you think? You know, is there an obligation to show the real thing? Namaganjan, what do you do?
I think there should be a balance, you know. In many cases, we see people on TV, on magazine covers, looking absolutely perfect. No flaws, nothing at all. And I think it depends on maybe the photographer or the brand that's publishing that article or those pictures on how much Photoshop they're going to use. And I think that it's a conversation that must be had, because it's very problematic for young people. I look at a lot of people and say, wow, they're so perfect, you know, they're flawless. But it's dangerous. We can't live in a society where we believe that certain people are perfect, and when you meet them, it's the total opposite.
But do people want to see the flawed person?
I'm undecided. At the same time, I feel like, okay, maybe we should be promoting more natural looking role models so that we can have more positive young people in our country who are confident about how they look, because we'll be looking at people who actually look the way they do. But at the same time, you know, when it comes to endorsements and brands, perfection is what wins at the end of the day.
So a lot of people will be raising questions about Dove and this whole campaign, and on the face of it, it sounds like a really good thing that you want to get young people feeling good about themselves and changing the way that they look at themselves, and that we don't create this angst. And some people might say, you know, sort of skeptically, but isn't this just a marketing gimmick to get us to love Dove? How do you balance the two?
I think in this case, I'm choosing to see the positive. Of course, it is marketing, but it's marketing in quite a different way to what we usually see. I mean, a brand that's willing to say, listen, we're not going to fake it. We're going to show you the real results. And that's what you want to see, because most of the time you're looking at it at an ad and it's advertising a skincare range, and you're thinking, okay, if I use this, my skin's going to look like this lady on the ad, and it doesn't bring those results, and it's frustrating. So I think although it is a marketing strategy, at the same time, I think they're going in the right direction, because now their customers will be getting their money's worth. They'll know exactly what they're buying.
I guess, I mean, after was it Loreto Khanyakwe that you spoke about? Yes. I guess it's going to take a lot of celebrities to be brave enough to put themselves as they really are. Alicia Keys recently has kind of said, look, I'm not going to wear makeup, I'm just going to show up. And that's quite a brave thing, but you know, she's a beautiful woman before makeup as well, I think, and maybe it's easier for her. What does one do? But
it took some adjusting also. She is beautiful. I'm not going to dispute that. She's beautiful. But seeing her without makeup for the first time was kind of surprising for me. Not because she was ugly, but she was definitely different, you know. And I think a lot of celebrities aren't even willing to go into that space, because they're trying to uphold a certain kind of image, a certain kind of look, you know. I think, well, now with Alicia Keys, things are working out for her. We've kind of accepted it. She's not taking no for an answer. She's not going to go back to putting on makeup. And I think it's a very beautiful thing, because now, for the first time, I realized that she's got freckles on her face, and she's owning it. And I'm just thinking, how many women out there with freckles and whatever beauty spots on their faces felt uncomfortable with that, until seeing her coming out and saying, listen, it's okay to be yourself, it's okay to be natural.
So Dove started this self-esteem project, I think as far back as 2004, to try and reach millions and millions of young girls by 2020, so that they have a different view. And I'm going to ask you to go back a few years, and kind of, you're in high school. Did you feel any kind of pressure by the imaging that you were seeing on the front pages of magazines that may have affected your own self-esteem journey?
Yeah, definitely. I look at the time when I was in high school, it was very fashionable to be skinnier, you know. And as African women, we generally have big kind of bodies and figures, you know, fuller figures, you know. And of course, being an African woman, it's inevitable that I have a fuller figure. And I used to stress so much about it, you know, saying that I'm too fat, I look too big, you know, until I reached a certain point where I realized, okay, maybe I can make looking this way fashionable, you know. So I think there are a lot of insecurities that especially black women face. It's having perfect hair.
So take a look at this picture here, which is interesting to me. Both pictures, beautiful woman. One is doctored and one isn't. So on the right, they've given her bluer eyes. They're lips are a little bit more shaped and things. So I don't know, what's your take? Is that false advertising on the right to sort of give the eyes more brilliance, for example?
It definitely is.
And you see her cheeks just sort of, you know, that lifeline there has been sort of doctored out.
No, it's definitely false advertising, because let's say this was advertising as maybe makeup. I would think that, okay, I can buy this too and look like her and achieve that exact look, and that's very dangerous.
Does that line bother you when you see it? Do you know what I mean? I don't know if we can bring that image up again, because I just like for people to see it again. They can put it, okay. So, because that's what they've doctored out. They've taken it out. The
laugh lines and all that. I think for accepting who you are and how you look comes with accepting all those little flaws. And for me, I've given up on thinking, okay, I can doctor this and doctor that, because you see a lot of celebrities, especially in the States, going for surgery and coming out looking a mess, you know. They look totally different to how they were.
Kim Kardashian, this is an interesting one as well. Let's take a look at this picture. So on the left, that's Kim, and I think she's lovely on the left, to be honest with you. And the eyes are different, the eyebrows look a bit fuller, and clearly, you know, she's got normal skin on the left there, just next to her left side of her lip, and on the right it's gone, it's disappeared. So you as a young girl, you look at this picture and you think, oh my goodness, if I show it even one pimple, that's it. That's the end of the world.
I think, Peter, it's a kind of pressure you also see on Instagram, and most people just edit their pictures just to look like the celebrities. So most of the pictures on Instagram are fake, in my opinion.
Because we've got these apps now that give you these new skin So what do you do here?
This is Photoshop at its highest form.
I must admit, there are days when I wake up and I wish some of the pictures that have done the rounds on social media are Photoshopped. Anyway, we're going to leave that there. Let's see if other companies will follow Dove in trying to present a more authentic face of the world, and putting marks saying that this picture hasn't been digitally moved or changed. And we'll see, maybe that will start to change society and change the rules a little bit. It'll be good, I've got a feeling. Anyway, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, digital news and the front pages of our newspapers and other things.
Come here, man. This place is looking a mess.
Boss, you holding the plans upside down.
Don't talk back. Lamba, you fire!
Unfair dismissal. Let Clientele Legal tackle your labour issues for you. We have tough, professional lawyers standing by to assist you 24 hours a day. SMS DEFEND to 32281 and we'll call you back. SMS now.
It is not the kings and generals that make history, but the masses of the people. I have always believed in this, but not to the extent to which I now believe that basic principle, because I have seen with my own eyes the masses of our people, the workers, the peasants, the doctors, the lawyers, the clergy, all our people. I have seen them making history.
Right, welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor on a Sunday morning. Let's take a look now at what's been trending, the stories that have been doing the rounds on social media in the past week. And now this package was prepared for us by our SABC Digital News Division.
Hashtag 100 Men March kicked off the week at the top of South Africa's trending topics on social media. On Wednesday, thousands of men heeded the call to march in Pretoria in opposition to violence against women and children. People on social media reacted to the march. On Tuesday, Duduzane Zuma was granted 100,000 rand bail at a specialized commercial crimes court in Johannesburg. He is charged with corruption, allegedly for his role where former Deputy Finance Minister SABC Jonas claimed there was an attempt to bribe him at the Gupta Saxon World home in 2015. Social media users commented on his looks. Hashtag England trended this week after they were beaten 2-1 by Croatia in the World Cup semi-finals on Wednesday. Croatia will face France in the finals. South Africa's Kevin Anderson has pulled off a stunning come-from-behind victory to upset defending champion and first seed Roger Federer in the quarter-final of the Wimbledon Championships. Anderson had to overcome a 2-set deficit before winning the fifth set 13-11 and become the first South African in the last 4 since Kevin Curran in the early 1980s.
All right, so that's what's been doing the rounds on social media this week, and a lot of stories there, Queenan, and I'm not sure which one took your attention. I want to start with Kevin Anderson because it is quite an incredible feat to get to the finals of Wimbledon, to beat Roger Federer on the way, and also to be in a match that lasted 6 hours with Eisner. I mean, that was quite a thing, wasn't it?
It was incredible. I think also the comments on Twitter were hilarious. Obviously, people saying that he's trying to play for 67 hours for Mandela. He's trying to do whatever. So there were so many comments about it, but it was a lovely game, and he fought through and through, and he deserved that win.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay, and Serena, shame.
Yeah.
She's going for number 24. And she's 37 years old this year, and she's just had a baby. To get to the final was an incredible feat.
I think she is an incredible sportswoman, and maybe she might end up playing until she's 40 at the rate that she's going. She's doing really well. And for her to just get to the finals, as you said, is a big achievement.
All right. Okay. Well, let's take a look at what's happening in the newspapers and what stories have grabbed your attention.
So on the Sunday Times front page is the Hawk 0 on Heist King. And they're talking about Bibi Gananda, who they're looking for. He's apparently the kingpin behind all these cash in transit heists. And I think it's a big story because the heist stories have been going on for weeks on end. Every week there's been a new heist in either Mpumalanga, Gauteng or the Northwest. So this is very good. I'm glad that the Hawks have actually made progress in finding the culprits behind this.
38 years old this young man is, and he's supposedly king of this empire. So one hopes that we'll see a dissipation of these cash in transit heists and that we don't have copycats coming through. Okay, what other story were you caught your attention?
So another part of the Sunday Times, they have a special on Madiba.
Okay.
There are a couple of stories about Madiba's rule, Humanity First, and that's by, they interviewed Zelda Lagrange, Madiba's former PA. There's also an article about a lifeline of written words, and we know Madiba to be an incredible orator, an incredible person in terms of expressing himself. So it's a lovely special where they've kind of put together all the memorable times in his life.
Because this week is an important week, and telling the Nelson Mandela story in the year that he would have turned 100 is going to be quite important. What would you like to see told? Because he was a guy who always said, tell everything, not just the good bits. But you as journalists this week you're gonna struggle to tell anything negative, I'm sure.
I think it's not about telling something negative. Like personally, I do a lot of human interest stories. So I would typically do a story where I'd speak to people who are close to him to tell me personal accounts. And I think that's where there's a bit of a shift, because I think most of these stories we read are being told in a sense that he's this superhero and he's put on a pedestal. So it would be nice to speak to people who know him on a human level, who can speak about his habits, his behavior, and all of that. So I think that's where we should be looking for our stories now.
All right, and then, you know, there's probably now a generation of young people who are now kind of becoming adults and so on and so forth, and have heard of Mandela but never really got to experience him because, you know, he had come out of office and he'd sort of withdrawn a little bit from public life. What story should we be telling about Madiba that they should appreciate, do you think?
I think there are a lot of little anecdotes about him, especially after being released from jail, and how South Africa had changed so much, and his reaction to that. I found those stories very interesting, and just the way he still was this very simple man, even though he was the president, you know. I think those are the kind of stories we need to tell, because we're living in a time where our leaders are not seen to be very simple. They seem to be elitist. They seem to be all about the money. So it would be nice to reflect on that part of him, especially for the young people, to know what kind of vision was there for South Africa post-apartheid.
Yeah, well, somebody who was very, very close to Nelson Mandela was our current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, and he's on the front pages of a couple of newspapers today. And one theme that's coming through is about his strength or lack of strength.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about him being a very weak leader, and it starts from the time when our former president Jacob Zuma had to resign, and they say that he wasn't pushing for it enough. He was too lax, and that's why Jacob Zuma took his time with leaving his position, or rather resigning. So people are looking from that time until now, and I think it's particularly because, unlike Jacob Zuma, Cyril is not in the news as much as Jacob Zuma. So we're not writing stories about him almost every day, about every single thing he's doing. But I do think that he is pulling some big deals on the side, you know, and we need to acknowledge that. And he is trying to clean up corruption, you know, so we need to look at the aspects where he is working, but I don't think he's making a lot of noise. You know, there's a difference there.
And he said in one of those papers that for him, if keeping the ANC together is seen as being weak, then I'd rather take that route. And that's how he explained the time lag in terms of recalling the former president. And it is a big job for him, isn't it? We're in an election cycle and he needs everybody on side. So that is a challenge that he has to try and sort of overcome.
And I think people also need to look at the factions within the ANC. So even when you look at the cabinet reshuffle that he did straight after his appointment, it was quite a compromise, because you can see people from the Zuma camp and the Ramaphosa camp coming together. And I think that is what he was trying to do, I mean, reach a kind of a compromise. Whether he was right in doing that, we don't know. Maybe he should have been more stern. I mean, only time will tell. I think we should give him time to see if he's going to turn the country around and then judge him based on that. But I think people just want a lot of noise, and he's not making noise. But when he is making noise, he's making the right noises, I must say. So I think it's a time thing. We shouldn't judge him prematurely.
All right, okay, all right. We'll leave the papers there for the time being. When we come back, an interesting development has taken place in terms of what happens to your Facebook account after you die.
Unfair dismissal, car accident, court appearance. Let Clientele Legal tackle your legal problems. Whether it is a car accident, unfair dismissal, uncontested divorce, unfair blacklisting, or a wrongful arrest, we have tough professional lawyers standing by to assist you.
With the help of Clientele Legal, I kept my job and I can support my family.
I definitely got value for money. It didn't cost me a cent, just my monthly premium.
There was one man with his lawyer against a big bank and I won.
Car accident, faulty goods or bad service,
you fired!
Unfair dismissal.
No matter how big or small your legal problems, don't tackle them by yourself. Clientele Legal will do the tough work for you. SMS RIGHT to 32281 and we'll call you back.
Right, welcome back. We're starting to wrap things up on Media Monitor this week, but we're going to close off with this interesting story. Germany's top court ruled last week on Thursday that Facebook should grant a grieving mother access to her dead daughter's Facebook account, saying that a social media account can be inherited just as letters are, and a diary, for example. In a landmark judgment for how social network data is treated after one passes away, the Federal Court of Justice in Karlsruhe in Germany ruled that the mother of a 15-year-old who was hit by a train in Berlin in 2012 would have access to her daughter's Facebook account, which the company had locked for privacy reasons. Let's take a look.
Today's verdict also affects other social media accounts, not just Facebook, but Instagram, and so on. So it's a verdict with far-reaching consequences.
As far as I understood the verdict, digital content is equal to letters, diaries, and other personal affairs which testators leave behind to his heirs.
All right, so an interesting development, and it does affect us all, and it might make us think about what we're going to leave on our Facebook accounts. Queen, your thoughts on this? Because I can see both sides of this being good and bad. Parents has a child who dies, or someone that they love has died, and you want to get everything that they may have, but it's the privacy of somebody as well.
So, in my opinion, when it comes to solving maybe a murder case or a case where somebody has been kidnapped, then I think it's quite valid because it might give you more information as to who the victim was speaking to prior to their disappearance or their death. So that's kind of justified. But in terms of just getting access to somebody's Facebook account, because you want closure and there's no real reason behind it, it could be quite problematic. Because in this case, are the parents ready to see their kids' direct messages, you know, their private messages on there, which could be a bit, it could be a bit stressful for the parents to read all those messages. So I don't know if they are ready for that.
All right, so the lawyers are treating this under what they call the inheritance law, and they're suggesting that if a parent can get given a child's diary, because that's where we wrote everything before, it wasn't on Facebook or social media, if they can be given a diary, then on principle it's the same thing. It's an electronic diary. What's the difference then?
I think there's a big difference, firstly, because when it comes to Facebook, there's an agreement, there are privacy agreements. You have the right to hold somebody accountable for going onto your page or hacking your page. You know, there are consequences to that. So it could be equivalent to your parents saying, listen, we want access now. We want to see everything that's on their page. Everything that's public, that's okay. But as soon as they go into your private messages, your direct messages, it becomes a bit problematic, because there are some policies that are put in place, and that's why we go on Facebook instead of writing in our journals.
But you know you can't defame a dead person. I mean, all these kinds of things fall away. And I can see your personal view.
Yes.
Take that away for a second and just look at it and say, look, here's a parent, child gets run over by a train. They want to know, was this an accident or did she commit suicide? Isn't that an important answer for them, that perhaps it's those kinds of cases that we need access to these accounts?
I think it is, okay, to a certain extent, obviously, because we're talking about a minor. You know, I think in this case specifically, yes, we could say it's a bit justified. But I don't think that across the board people should get access to their deceased family members' Facebook or Twitter pages or whatever. No, it's just wrong. I feel uncomfortable just thinking of it right now.
All right. So it is going to be quite interesting, because as they said in that clip, this is going to affect Instagram, this is going to affect Twitter, all sorts of social media. And I wonder if that means we're going to change our behavior.
Are we going to change our behavior?
Yes, knowing that what I'm writing actually is going to be read one day.
Wow. I don't know. I don't know if I would change my behavior. Okay, my behavior is quite good. I'm just saying that. But is it going to change other people's behaviors? I'm not sure. Hey, people are always comfortable when they know that everything is in private for that moment, and as long as they don't have to face the music directly.
Okay, Queen Maswabe, it's been fascinating chatting to you, but I think this is something that people will be chatting about quite a bit, even on social media itself. That's where we're going to end Media Monitor for this week. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in, and catch you again next week at the same time. In the meantime, keep warm, and I don't know who you're supporting. Is it Vive la France or Well Done Croatia? We'll see a little bit later on. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.